St Ives, there's this long tradition of artists going there because the light and colour is extraordinary. For the last 20 years or so, I've been going every year and maybe a number of times a year. Having come back from Cornwall, I feel very familiar with and connected to it. I've been working out in the landscape there, and it's really fed into my work, I think. When I'm there, I've got my sketchbook, my paints, and I go out there and try and get down what I can see. And it's such a huge expanse to get onto a little bit of paper. But it's a way of connecting with the landscape, the elements, and by drawing and painting, I feel that's a way of absorbing it all. Then, when I come back to London and I'm in the studio, there's a sense of release at being back here, because having spent a week or 2 weeks working in a small sketchbook, I then come back here and I've got these relatively big canvases to work on. It's different. I'm not struggling to get down something I can see. I'm just trying to let it flow, basically. So it's a very different experience. One thing I've found is really important to me is to work in a series of paintings, all rather similar. The smaller ones I might have perhaps 6 or 8 on the go, and the larger ones probably just 2, and that's just down to space. If I had a huge studio, I'd probably have 12 of them or something. Once they're dry and I can put them up around the studio, I can think, well, maybe if I try that on that painting. And that's what happens actually with a series. There's a sort of dialogue that goes on between them. My paintings evolved from the previous paintings, so it's sort of art about art, really, but sort of located in working in the landscape. It's about building up a sort of rhythm and a pace, and therefore a momentum. I couldn't get that going all on one painting. It's got to be over a number of paintings. It gives me ideas to try one thing out onto another. So they do inform each other. And over the last few years I've worked in a much more fluid way, which has required me to work on the floor because, you know, it's too wet. If I work on the walls it will just slide off, basically. That affects the sort of gestures and mark making. I think some really interesting things happen if I work on the floor and then let it dry there. When I put the work up on the wall, it looks like it's sort of motion in suspension. That's more likely to happen if it's very diluted and on the floor. Quite often I'll just turn them to the wall and leave them. I don't look at them for a week or 2, and that really helps for me to distance myself and be a bit more objective. Then I can come back to it and think, yeah, I can see what I need to do with that now. It might be over a couple of months that painting's evolved. Well, the other thing is, if I think I've half got something, then I get a bit precious over it and don't want to do anything that's going to ruin the bit that's working well. And that's always a dangerous situation because it means, you know, I'm being too self-conscious about it. So I sort of think it's healthy to be prepared to take it to destruction, be prepared to experiment in that way and not to be too restrained. Of course, it's not easy to know when a painting's finished, ever, but what I'm looking for is some sort of resolution for me in terms of the composition and that it's got a certain energy as well. But those things are very hard to pin down, and it's good to be able to compare one to another because that helps me decide if one is finished or not. I just think it's a really good antidote to the digital world. Yeah, it's the best.